My fiancé died in Afghanistan 4 years ago. I just saw him buying groceries with a different family. I saw him in the cereal aisle at Whole Foods on a Saturday afternoon in March. He was reaching for a box of granola, the organic kind with almonds that he always preferred, when a little girl maybe 5 years old tugged on his jacket and asked if they could get the chocolate cereal instead. He smiled down at her with that same crooked grin I'd memorized during 2 years together, the one that always started on the left side of his mouth before spreading across his face. Then a woman appeared next to him, pregnant and glowing, placing her hand on his arm while saying something that made him laugh. My cart crashed into the display of pasta sauce before I realized I'd let go of it. Glass shattered across the polished floor, red sauce spreading like blood, and suddenly everyone was staring at me instead of shopping. But I couldn't stop looking at him. At Lieutenant Nathan Cross, my fiancé who'd been killed by an IED outside Kandahar on November 14, 2019. The man whose dress uniform I'd kept in my closet for 4 years. The man whose folded flag sat on my mantle. The man I'd watched being lowered into the ground at Arlington National Cemetery while 7 rifles fired 3 volleys each into a gray winter sky. He turned at the sound of breaking glass, and for one frozen moment our eyes met across 30 feet of grocery store. I watched recognition flicker across his face, watched his expression shift from casual curiosity to something that looked like terror. The woman next to him was asking if he was okay, if he knew what caused the commotion, but he wasn't listening. He was staring at me with the face of someone seeing a ghost, except I wasn't the ghost in this scenario. He was. The little girl was tugging his hand now, saying "Daddy," over and over, but he seemed paralyzed, frozen in place like prey that knows it's been spotted by a predator. Then the spell broke. He grabbed the woman's arm and said something urgent in her ear. She looked confused but nodded. He scooped up the little girl with practiced ease and started walking rapidly toward the back of the store. Away from me, away from the checkout lanes, toward the employee area where customers weren't supposed to go. I ran after him. My shoes slipped in spilled marinara, but I caught myself on a shopping cart and kept moving. A store employee was asking if I was okay, if I needed help, offering to call someone to clean up the mess I'd made. I pushed past him without answering. Nathan had disappeared through a door marked "Staff Only," and I slammed through it seconds later, finding myself in a concrete hallway lined with storage rooms and industrial shelving. I could hear his footsteps ahead, the little girl asking why they were running, the pregnant woman's breathless voice trying to keep up. I screamed his name. "Nathan! Nathan Cross! Stop running from me!" The footsteps hesitated, then stopped completely. I rounded a corner and found them at the end of the hallway near an emergency exit. He'd set the girl down, but was holding her hand protectively, positioning himself between her and me. The woman had her phone out, probably calling security or police. Nathan held up his free hand in a gesture that could have been surrender or warning. His voice when he spoke was exactly as I remembered it, deep and measured with that slight Virginia accent. "Emma, please, you need to leave. You need to go right now." Hearing him say my name, hearing his voice after 4 years of silence, after 4 years of grief and therapy, and slowly learning to function again, made my knees buckle. I grabbed the wall for support. "You're dead," I said. The words came out broken, barely coherent. "You're dead. I went to your funeral. I spoke at your funeral. I told everyone about how you proposed on the beach in Virginia, and how you wanted 3 kids and a dog and a house with a big backyard. I told them you were a hero. They gave me a flag and a medal and a letter from the president thanking me for your sacrifice." The little girl was crying now, scared by the strange woman yelling in the hallway. The pregnant woman pulled her closer, her face a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. Nathan's expression was anguished. "Emma, I know this is impossible to understand, but you have to trust me. You have to leave right now and forget you saw me. Your life depends on it. My family's life depends on it. Please." The pregnant woman's voice cut through the moment, sharp and demanding. "Nathan, who is this woman? What is she talking about? What funeral?" Nathan turned to her, his face collapsing into something that looked like despair. "Melissa, take Sophia and go out the emergency exit. Get in the car and drive to your sister's house. Don't go home. I'll call you later and explain everything." Melissa stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what the hell is happening. Who is she? Why is she calling you by your name?" Her emphasis on your name made something click in my brain. I looked at Nathan more carefully. He was thinner than I remembered, his hair cut shorter, almost military regulation, but not quite. He wore glasses now, black-framed ones he'd never needed before. His clothes were civilian casual, jeans and a polo shirt, nothing like the cargo pants and band t-shirts he'd favored off-duty. Small differences, but they added up to someone who looked like Nathan but lived as someone else. "What name does she call you?" I asked. My voice was steadier now, shock giving way to anger. "What name are you using with your pregnant wife and your daughter? What name did you use when you faked your own death and abandoned me?" Nathan's face went pale. He looked between me and Melissa, trapped, and I could see him calculating options and finding none that would work. Security would arrive soon, police probably not far behind. This hallway confrontation couldn't last much longer. He needed to make a choice, and I could see the moment he made it in the way his shoulders dropped and his jaw clenched. "My name is David Whitmore," he said quietly. "I work as an accountant in Silver Spring. I've lived in Maryland for 3 years. I met Melissa 2.5 years ago. We got married 18 months ago. Sophia is my stepdaughter. And before any of that, before this entire life existed, I was Nathan Cross, and I was engaged to Emma Kaplan, and I was supposed to die in Afghanistan. Melissa made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. She backed away from Nathan, pulling Sophia with her, her free hand instinctively going to her pregnant belly. What are you talking about? You told me you grew up in Pennsylvania. You told me your parents died in a car accident. You told me you'd never been married. Nathan, or David, or whoever he was, tried to reach for Melissa, but she jerked away from his touch. Everything I told you was a lie, he said, and hearing him admit it so baldly made something inside me snap. Everything I told you was a lie too, I said. My voice was rising again, 4 years of grief converting into rage. You told me you loved me. You told me you couldn't wait to marry me when your deployment ended. You told me you were going to leave the army and we'd start our life together. You sent me emails about the house you wanted to buy and the honeymoon you were planning and the future we were building. And then the casualty officers showed up at my apartment at 6 a.m. and told me you were dead. They told me an IED detonated under your Humvee during a routine patrol. They told me you died instantly, didn't suffer, was a hero serving his country. I believed them. I believed all of them. I destroyed myself with grief for a man who was alive and building a new life with someone else. Footsteps were approaching from the direction I'd come. Multiple people moving fast. Security definitely, possibly police. Nathan heard them too. He looked at the emergency exit, calculating whether he could run, whether he should run. Then he looked at me, and something in his expression shifted. Resignation, maybe, or relief. Like part of him was glad this was finally happening. I couldn't tell you, he said. They told me I couldn't tell anyone. They said if I contacted you or my family or anyone from my old life, people would die. They said the program only worked if Nathan Cross stayed dead. Program. The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. What program? Melissa demanded. She was crying now, mascara running down her face, one hand still clutching Sophia, who'd buried her face in her mother's leg. What are you talking about? Nathan, David, whoever you are, what program? Before he could answer, 3 security guards and 2 police officers burst into the hallway. They took in the scene with professional assessment, hands moving to their weapons without drawing them. The lead officer, a woman in her 40s with gray streaking her dark hair, addressed all of us with calm authority. We got a call about a disturbance. Everyone okay here? Anyone need medical attention? Nobody answered immediately. The tableau was too strange, too charged with emotions that couldn't be explained quickly. Nathan was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, pleading maybe, or warning. The lead officer tried again. Ma'am, she said, addressing me. The store manager said you crashed your cart and then ran back here after someone. Are you having a medical emergency? Are you in danger from this man? The question hung there, loaded with implications. Was I in danger from Nathan? Physically, no. Emotionally, I'd been in danger from him for 4 years without knowing he was the source. But if I said yes, if I accused him of something, police would get involved officially. There would be reports, questions, investigations. Whatever secret Nathan was hiding, whatever program he'd mentioned, would potentially come to light. I could see him watching me, waiting for my answer, knowing I held the power to destroy whatever new life he'd built. Part of me wanted to destroy it, wanted him to feel even a fraction of what I'd felt, but a larger part needed answers first, needed to understand what had happened and why before I decided what to do with the information. No, I said slowly. No medical emergency. I thought I saw someone I knew. I was wrong. The lie felt like swallowing glass. The lead officer looked skeptical. She'd clearly picked up on the tension. The crying child. The pregnant woman who looked shell-shocked. You sure about that? Because your reaction to seeing this person you thought you knew was apparently violent enough to crash a shopping cart into a display. I forced myself to breathe normally, to speak calmly. I have panic attacks sometimes. PTSD from losing someone in the military. I thought I saw him, but obviously I was wrong because he's dead. This man just resembles him. I apologize for the disturbance. The officer studied me for a long moment, then looked at Nathan. Sir, do you know this woman? Has she bothered you before? Nathan shook his head. His voice was steady when he spoke. No trace of the anguish from moments before. Never seen her before today. My wife and daughter and I were shopping when she started screaming and chasing us. We got scared and ran back here. I was about to call 911 when you arrived. The lies came so easily to him, so smoothly, like he'd been practicing deception for years. Maybe he had been. The officer seemed satisfied with this explanation. She turned back to me. Ma'am, I understand PTSD is difficult, but you can't chase people through stores screaming at them. You crashed a cart and damaged property. The store manager wants to speak with you about payment for the broken merchandise. If you leave peacefully now and handle that situation, we won't file charges for disturbing the peace. But if there's another incident, if you approach this family again, there will be consequences. Understood? I understood perfectly. I was being warned off, being told to leave Nathan and his new family alone or face legal problems. It was a reasonable position from the officer's perspective. She saw a traumatized woman having a breakdown, not a dead man living under a false identity. I nodded. Understood. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. The officers escorted me back through the store. The pasta sauce had been cleaned up, my abandoned cart removed. The manager, a nervous man in his 30s, met us at the front and presented me with a bill for $370 in damaged merchandise. I paid with my credit card without arguing. As I walked to my car, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock the door. I sat in the driver's seat and tried to process what had just happened. Nathan was alive. Nathan had faked his death, or someone had faked it for him. He was living under a different name, with a different family, a completely different life. And he'd looked at me like I was the threat, like I was the danger to his peaceful existence. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press accept. Nathan's voice came through, urgent and low. Emma, it's me. Don't say anything, just listen. Meet me at Fort Stevens Park in 2 hours. Come alone. Don't tell anyone about this. If you tell anyone, if you bring anyone with you, I'll disappear and you'll never get answers. 2 hours. Come alone. He hung up before I could respond. I sat staring at the phone. Adrenaline and anger and desperate need for answers all warring inside me. This could be a trap, could be dangerous, could be exactly the kind of stupid decision that got women killed in true crime documentaries. But it was also Nathan. And despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies, I needed to know what happened. Needed to understand how the man I'd loved could do this to me. I drove home in a daze, my mind replaying every interaction we'd ever had, searching for signs I'd missed. Nathan and I had met at a military appreciation event in D.C., where I'd been volunteering. He was on leave between deployments, handsome in his uniform, charming without being arrogant. We'd talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. He'd asked for my number. We'd dated for 6 months before he deployed to Afghanistan. The deployment was supposed to be 9 months. We'd stayed in contact through emails and occasional video calls when the internet connection allowed. He'd proposed via Skype on my birthday, holding up a ring he'd bought at a market in Kabul, promising to do it properly when he got home. 3 months later, he was dead. Except he wasn't dead. He was buying groceries with his pregnant wife and stepdaughter. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in the parking lot trying to decide what to do. I should call someone. My best friend Lauren, maybe. Or Nathan's parents, who I'd stayed in touch with after the funeral, who still invited me to family gatherings because I'd been supposed to become their daughter-in-law. But Nathan had been explicit. Come alone or he'd disappear. And I believed him. Believed he had the resources and the knowledge to vanish completely if he chose to. Fort Stevens Park was a Civil War historic site in northwest D.C., full of earthworks and walking trails, and enough isolation that a conversation wouldn't be overheard. I arrived 15 minutes early and found a spot near the old fort ruins. The March afternoon was cold and gray, threatening rain, and I was the only person in this section of the park. Nathan appeared exactly on time, walking up the trail from the parking area. He'd changed clothes, now wearing a dark jacket and jeans, the glasses gone. Without them, he looked more like the man I remembered, and my heart did a painful twist in my chest. He stopped 10 feet away from me, maintaining distance. Thank you for coming. Thank you for not bringing anyone. His voice was careful, controlled. I laughed bitterly. I'm here for answers, not because I'm doing you a favor. You owe me 4 years of my life back. You owe me an explanation that makes sense of the hell you put me through. Start talking. Nathan looked around the park, checking for observers, then focused back on me. What I'm about to tell you is classified information. If you share it with anyone, if you go to media or police or post it online, people will die. Do you understand? I crossed my arms. You keep saying people will die. What people? Why? Stop being cryptic and explain. Nathan took a breath like he was about to jump off a cliff. In 2019, I witnessed something I wasn't supposed to see. My unit was doing security for a supply convoy outside Kandahar. We stopped at a checkpoint that was supposed to be friendly. Afghan National Army soldiers we'd been working with for months. While we were waiting, I went around the back of one of the buildings to take a piss, and I saw 3 American contractors executing 2 Afghan civilians. Not in combat, not in self-defense, just execution-style murders. I recognized one of the contractors, a guy named Ray Sullivan who worked for a private military company called Stonebridge Security. They saw me see them. Sullivan aimed his weapon at me, told me I'd seen nothing, told me to get back to my unit and keep my mouth shut or they'd make sure I had an accident. I felt cold spreading through my chest. You witnessed war crimes. Nathan nodded. War crimes being committed by a company that had contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars with the Defense Department. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't tell my commanding officer because I didn't know who to trust. Stonebridge had people embedded everywhere, had relationships with officers up and down the chain of command. So, I contacted Army CID, Criminal Investigation Division, through a secure channel. I sent them everything I'd seen, the location, the date, the names of the contractors involved. 2 days later, someone tried to kill me. The casual way he said it made the words hit harder. An RPG hit our convoy during a patrol. The attack looked like standard Taliban ambush, but the timing was too convenient. It happened less than 48 hours after I contacted CID, and the RPG hit my vehicle specifically, not the lead or rear truck. I survived because I'd been riding with the gunner that day instead of inside the cabin. The driver and another soldier died. I was injured, concussed, evac'd to Germany. While I was recovering, 2 CID agents came to see me. They told me the investigation into Stonebridge had gone higher than they expected. They'd found evidence of systematic corruption, of contractors killing civilians to inflate enemy casualty numbers and justify continued presence, of money being funneled to warlords and Taliban commanders. It was huge, and everyone involved had massive incentives to keep it quiet. I was starting to understand where this was going, but it still seemed impossible. They offered you witness protection. Nathan nodded again. They said Stonebridge had people in the military, in the contractor community, probably in government. They said if I testified, if I went public with what I saw, I'd be killed. They said my family would be targeted. They said you would be targeted. The only way to keep everyone safe was if Nathan Cross died and I became someone else. I stared at him, trying to reconcile this story with the man I'd known. You could have told me. You could have let me make that choice with you. Nathan's expression was anguished. They said no contact. 0. If I told you, if you knew I was alive, you'd be in danger. Stonebridge would monitor anyone connected to me, looking for signs I'd survived. If you knew and acted like you knew, if you let anything slip, they'd know. And they'd use you to get to me. The only way the program worked was if everyone, including you, believed I was dead. The logic was sound, but the cruelty of it was overwhelming. So, you let them fake your death. You let me grieve. You let your parents grieve. You let everyone who loved you destroy themselves thinking you were gone. Nathan's voice broke. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than anything in combat. I begged them to let me tell you something. Send you some sign that I was okay. They refused. They said clean break or no deal. So, I made the choice. I chose to protect you by letting you think I was dead. I've regretted it every day since. The confession didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made me angrier. You regretted it so much that you married someone else. Had a life with someone else. You seem to have managed your regret pretty well. Nathan flinched. I met Melissa 2 years after everything happened. I was David Whitmore by then. Completely new identity, new background, new life. I was lonely and broken and trying to figure out how to exist. She was kind, and she didn't know anything about Nathan Cross or Afghanistan or any of it. Being with her meant I could pretend to be someone who wasn't carrying all this weight. I know that's not fair to her. I know I built our relationship on a foundation of lies, but I needed to be someone other than the person who abandoned everyone he loved. I wanted to scream at him, to hit him, to make him feel some fraction of the pain I'd carried. But we were in a public park, and I was barely holding myself together. What about Stonebridge? What happened with the investigation? Nathan's face darkened. Nothing. That's what happened. I testified in closed hearings. I gave them everything I had. But Stonebridge had too many connections, too much money, too much leverage. The investigation got buried under national security classifications. A few low-level contractors were quietly fired. The company paid a fine and restructured under a different name. Nobody went to prison. Nobody faced real consequences. I stayed dead for nothing. The bitterness in his voice was corrosive. 4 years in hiding, 4 years living under a false identity, relationships destroyed, life obliterated, all for an investigation that went nowhere. So why are you still in hiding? If the investigation is over, if nothing came of it, why not come back? Nathan shook his head. Because officially, I'm still dead. Because the people I testified against still want me dead. Because coming back would mean admitting the army faked a soldier's death, would mean exposing the witness protection program they used, would open them up to lawsuits and congressional investigations. They need Nathan Cross to stay dead permanently. I signed documents agreeing to never resume my previous identity. If I violate that agreement, I lose all protection and probably get prosecuted for fraud. The trap was perfect. Nathan couldn't come back without destroying his new life and potentially facing legal consequences. But staying hidden meant living with the guilt and the lies forever. What happens now? I asked. What happens now that I've seen you? Now that I know? Nathan looked at me with something like desperation. You forget you saw me? You go back to your life? You let David Whitmore exist in peace with his family? Please, Emma, I'm begging you. Let me stay dead. The audacity of the request took my breath away. You're asking me to carry this secret, to know you're alive and pretend I don't, to let your parents keep grieving, to let everyone keep believing the lie. Nathan stepped closer, his voice urgent. My parents were told. The army contacted them after everything was settled. They know I'm alive. They know why I had to disappear. They agreed to maintain the fiction for my safety. They're the only ones who know besides you now. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Your parents know? They've known for 4 years that you're alive and they let me grieve? They let me come to family dinners and talk about how much I missed you and they said nothing? Nathan's silence was confirmation enough. I thought about Nathan's mother, Claire, how she'd hugged me at the funeral and whispered that Nathan had loved me so much, how his father Robert had told me I'd always be part of their family. They'd known. They'd known he was alive and they'd let me suffer. The betrayal was layered and deep and so complete I couldn't fully process it. I need to go, I said. My voice sounded distant, disconnected. I need to leave before I do something I'll regret. Nathan reached for my arm, but I jerked away from his touch. Emma, please. I know you're angry. I know you have every right to be, but you have to understand the position I was in, the impossible choices I had to make. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The man I'd loved, the man I'd planned to marry, wouldn't have done this, wouldn't have let me grieve for years, wouldn't have built a new life while I was still trying to survive the old one. You made your choices, I said. You chose to protect yourself and your new family. You chose to let me believe a lie. Those were your choices. Now I get to make mine. I walked away before he could respond, back toward the parking lot, my vision blurring with tears I'd been holding back. Behind me, I heard him call my name once, then silence. I got in my car and drove aimlessly for an hour, mind spinning with information I didn't know how to process. Nathan was alive, but might as well be dead because he could never come back. He'd witnessed war crimes and testified and accomplished nothing except his own destruction. He'd married someone else, was starting a family, was living a completely different life, and I was supposed to accept it, supposed to carry the secret, supposed to let him have his peace. I ended up at Lauren's apartment without consciously deciding to go there. She opened the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. The phrase was so apt it made me laugh hysterically. Lauren guided me to her couch and handed me a glass of water. I drank it without tasting it, trying to figure out where to start, what I could say. Nathan had warned me not to tell anyone, had said people would die if I revealed the truth, but I was breaking apart, couldn't hold this alone. I saw Nathan today, I said. The words felt surreal. I saw him at Whole Foods buying groceries with his wife and daughter. Lauren stared at me. Emma, honey, Nathan's been dead for 4 years. You couldn't have seen him. Maybe someone who looked like him? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo I'd taken secretly before leaving the park. Nathan standing near the fort ruins, face clearly visible. Lauren's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, that's him. That's actually him. How is that possible? I told her everything. The encounter at the store, the meeting at the park, the story about Stonebridge security and witness protection and faked death. Lauren listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, anger, and disbelief. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she grabbed her laptop and started searching. Stonebridge security. Let me see what I can find. She pulled up articles, congressional hearing transcripts, investigation reports. The company had been investigated in 2019 for contractor misconduct in Afghanistan. The investigation had been inconclusive, result in minimal penalties, was largely forgotten by 2020 when COVID dominated the news cycle. There were hints of witness testimony, references to protected sources, but no names. Nothing that confirmed Nathan's story, but nothing that contradicted it either. Lauren scrolled through more results. Emma, if what he told you is true, if he really is in witness protection because he testified about war crimes, then this is bigger than just you and him. This is about government corruption, about a system that protects contractors instead of soldiers, about people getting away with murder. I knew where she was going with this, and I shook my head. Nathan said if I tell anyone, people will die. He said the people he testified against are still out there, still dangerous. Lauren looked at me intently. He also built a new life with a new woman while you destroyed yourself with grief. Maybe his warnings are designed to keep you quiet and compliant. Maybe he's protecting himself, not you. The possibility hadn't occurred to me, but now it took root. What if Nathan had lied about everything? What if there was no Stonebridge, no witness protection, no threat? What if he'd simply wanted to escape his old life, his obligations, his relationship, and this elaborate story was cover? But no, that didn't make sense. The army had told me he was dead, had given me a death certificate, a flag, a funeral with full military honors. You couldn't fake that without government involvement, unless the government had reasons of their own to make Nathan disappear. Lauren was still researching, pulling up more information. Look at this. Ray Sullivan, the contractor Nathan mentioned, he died in a car accident 6 months after Nathan supposedly died. Single vehicle crash listed as accidental. But look at the circumstances. His car went off a bridge in the middle of the day on a clear road. No skid marks, no evidence of mechanical failure. People speculated it was suicide or murder. She pulled up another article. And here, 3 other Stonebridge employees died in 2020. One in a training accident, one from a heart attack at 35 years old, one in a mugging gone wrong. That's a lot of dead people connected to one company in a short time frame. The pattern was suspicious, but not conclusive. People died all the time. Correlation wasn't causation. But it suggested Nathan's story might be true, that the people he'd testified against were dangerous, were willing to kill to protect their secrets. My phone rang. Unknown number again. I answered it, and an unfamiliar voice came through. Male, neutral tone. Ms. Kaplan, my name is Agent Dennis Crawford with Army CID. I understand you had an encounter today with someone claiming to be Nathan Cross. I need to speak with you about that. Can you meet me tomorrow morning at 10 at our field office in Quantico? My blood went cold. How do you know about that? Who told you? Agent Crawford's voice remained neutral. Please just confirm you'll meet me tomorrow. This is a matter of national security. 10 a.m. at Quantico. I'll send you the address. He hung up before I could argue. Lauren had heard enough of the conversation to look alarmed. National security? Emma, what have you gotten into? I didn't know, but the walls were closing in fast. Someone had reported my encounter with Nathan. Maybe the police from the grocery store had run my name and flagged something in the system. Maybe Nathan had reported it himself. Maybe someone else entirely had been watching. I barely slept that night, mind churning through scenarios and possibilities. By morning, I'd decided to meet with Agent Crawford. I needed to know what the Army knew, what they wanted from me, whether Nathan's story was true. Lauren insisted on coming with me. You're not going alone to meet some mysterious government agent. I'll wait in the lobby, but I'm coming. We drove to Quantico together, arriving at the CID field office with 15 minutes to spare. The building was unmarked and secure, requiring ID check and metal detector screening just to enter the lobby. I gave the receptionist my name and waited. At exactly 10, Agent Crawford appeared. He was in his 50s, gray-haired, wearing a suit that looked government-issued. His expression was carefully neutral. Ms. Kaplan, thank you for coming. Please follow me. He led me to a small conference room, gestured for me to sit. Another agent was already there, a woman in her 30s who introduced herself as Agent Lisa Chen. I corrected her immediately. I'm sorry, what's your name again? The woman looked confused. Agent Lisa Monroe. Did I misspeak? I realized I'd misheard, my brain pattern matching to names I'd been told to avoid. No, my mistake. Sorry. Agent Crawford sat across from me, hands folded on the table. Ms. Kaplan, yesterday you had an encounter at a grocery store in Silver Spring with a man you believed to be Lieutenant Nathan Cross. Is that correct? I hesitated, unsure how much to admit. I had a panic attack in a grocery store. I thought I saw someone who resembled my deceased fiancé. I was wrong. Crawford's expression didn't change. You chased this man through the store, caused property damage, and cornered him in a back hallway. The police were called. You told them you have PTSD related to military loss. All of that is documented. I said nothing, waiting to see where he was going. Agent Monroe leaned forward. Ms. Kaplan, Nathan Cross is dead. He died in Afghanistan in 2019. His death was investigated, confirmed, and recorded officially. If someone is impersonating him, if someone is using his identity or claiming to be him, that's a serious crime. We need to know everything about your encounter so we can investigate. The way she phrased it was interesting. Not, you were mistaken. Not, you saw someone who resembled him, but if someone is impersonating him. Like they knew something and were testing whether I knew it too. I decided to take a risk. What if Nathan Cross isn't dead? What if his death was faked as part of a witness protection program after he testified about contractor war crimes in Afghanistan? The two agents exchanged a glance, some wordless communication passing between them. Crawford's face hardened. Where did you hear that story? So it was a story they knew, which meant parts of it were probably true. The man I saw yesterday told me. He said he was Nathan Cross, that he'd witnessed murders committed by Stonebridge security contractors, that he'd been placed in witness protection after testifying. He said he was living under the name David Whitmore now. Agent Monroe was taking notes. Did he tell you anything else? Names of other people involved? Locations? Specific details about the alleged crimes? I shook my head. Just what I told you. He said the investigation was buried, that the people he testified against were still dangerous, that he needed to stay dead for his safety and mine. Crawford sat back, studying me. Ms. Kaplan, I'm going to be direct with you. The story you were told is false. Nathan Cross died in Afghanistan. There is no witness protection program, no testimony about Stonebridge, no conspiracy. What you encountered yesterday was either someone who looks remarkably like your fiancé and is using your grief to manipulate you, or you experienced a PTSD-related hallucination and convinced yourself it was real. Either way, you need to stop investigating this, stop looking for Nathan Cross, and move on with your life. The dismissal was too quick, too absolute. If they really believed I was hallucinating or being scammed, they would have asked more questions, would have wanted to investigate the impersonator, would have shown concern for my welfare. Instead, they were shutting me down and telling me to forget about it, which suggested they were protecting something. What if I don't stop? I asked. What if I keep looking for answers? Crawford's voice went cold. Then you'll be interfering with matters of national security. You'll be violating federal laws related to classified information. You could face prosecution, imprisonment, and civil penalties. Is that really what you want? The threat was clear. Back off or face consequences. I stood up, my chair scraping across the floor. Am I free to go? Agent Monroe nodded. Yes, but Ms. Kaplan, please take our warning seriously. Some things are better left alone. Some deaths should stay deaths. I walked out of the conference room, found Lauren in the lobby, and left the building without speaking until we were in the car. Then I turned to her. They're lying. They know Nathan is alive. They basically admitted it with their threats. Lauren started the car but didn't drive yet. So what now? They told you to back off. They threatened you with prosecution. Maybe you should listen. Maybe this is too dangerous. I thought about Nathan living his new life, about his parents knowing the truth, about being told to accept lies for the sake of national security. I thought about the look on his face at the grocery store, the terror of being discovered, the desperation in his voice at the park. He'd asked me to let him stay dead. The government was ordering me to let him stay dead. Everyone wanted me to carry this secret and move on, but something in me refused. I'm not backing off, I said. I'm going to find out the whole truth, and then I'm going to decide what to do with it. Over the next 2 weeks, I became obsessed. I researched Stonebridge security, read every article, every report, every congressional hearing transcript. I looked up the names of contractors who'd worked for them, searched for connections between deaths and the company. I found patterns, suggestions of violence, hints of cover-ups, but nothing concrete enough to prove Nathan's story definitively. I hired a private investigator, a former military police officer named Angela Reeves, who specialized in cases involving veterans. I told her I'd seen my supposedly dead fiancé alive and needed to verify his identity. She looked at the photo I'd taken at the park and said she'd see what she could find. 3 days later, she called me. Emma, I found David Whitmore. He lives in Silver Spring, works as an accountant for a mid-sized firm, has been there for 3 years. His background check came back clean, social security number valid, driver's license legitimate. If he's Nathan Cross, someone with serious resources created this identity for him. We're talking government-level identity fabrication. She sent me an address. His house. His wife's name is Melissa Whitmore. She's 32, works as a pediatric nurse, has a daughter, Sophia, from a previous relationship. They got married 18 months ago, according to public records. She's due to give birth in 2 months. This all seems legitimate, Emma. If this man is your fiancé, he's been living a complete double life. I drove to the address Angela had provided. It was a townhouse in a nice neighborhood, flowers in the front yard, a child's bike on the porch. Through the front window, I could see Melissa moving around inside, her pregnant belly visible in profile. This was Nathan's life now, his real life, while his previous life with me had been erased. I sat in my car watching the house and trying to decide what to do. I could knock on the door, could confront Melissa directly, could tell her that her husband was living under a false identity. That would destroy her life, her pregnancy, her daughter's stability. But didn't she deserve to know? Didn't she deserve the truth about who she'd married? My phone rang. Nathan's voice came through, tense and urgent. Emma, you need to stop. I know you hired a private investigator. I know you're looking into my life. You're putting everyone in danger. I felt a flash of anger. You're monitoring me? You're tracking what I'm doing? Nathan's voice was strained. People are watching you now. The same people I testified against. When you started digging into Stonebridge, when you started asking questions, you triggered alerts. They know you're connected to me. They know you're investigating. And they will hurt you to get to me or to keep you quiet. Please, Emma, drop this before something happens that can't be undone. I looked at the townhouse, at Melissa visible through the window. Does she know? Does your wife know who you really are? Nathan was quiet for a long moment. No. She knows David Whitmore. She doesn't know Nathan Cross. The admission felt like another betrayal, though I wasn't sure why it should matter at this point. She deserves the truth. Your daughter deserves to know who her father really is. Nathan's voice cracked. My stepdaughter deserves to grow up safe and secure with a father who's present, even if that father is living under a false name. Melissa deserves to raise her baby in peace without knowing her husband is a ghost. I'm protecting them the only way I know how, which is by keeping them ignorant. I learned that from how I protected you. The parallel was intentional and cruel. He'd protected me through ignorance too, through letting me believe he was dead. And now I was suggesting he do the opposite with Melissa, expose her to the truth and all its dangers. I couldn't argue the contradiction. What do you want from me, Nathan? You want me to forget I saw you? Want me to pretend you're dead again? Want me to carry your secret and never tell anyone? Nathan's voice was desperate. I want you to be safe. I want you to live your life without looking over your shoulder. I want you to let go of Nathan Cross and everything he represented because that person is gone. Please, Emma, please let me go. The plea was genuine, raw with emotion, and part of me wanted to grant it, wanted to walk away and try to rebuild the life I'd started constructing after his death. But I'd been robbed of 4 years. 4 years of grief, of therapy, of slowly learning to function without him. And now I was supposed to just accept it. Supposed to be grateful he was alive somewhere even if I couldn't have him. It felt like another theft, another loss. I can't promise you anything, I said. I need time to process this. Time to decide what I'm going to do with what I know. I hung up before he could respond. I sat in front of his house for another hour, watching Melissa move around inside, watching the life Nathan had built for himself. Then I drove home and cried for 3 hours straight, mourning the man I'd loved and the future we'd planned and the relationship that had been destroyed by forces beyond our control. Or maybe not beyond control. Maybe Nathan had made choices, and those choices had consequences, and I was one of those consequences he'd tried to avoid dealing with. The next morning, I found a package on my doorstep. No return address, no shipping label, just my name written in marker. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Emma, this is everything. All the evidence I gathered, all the testimony I gave, all the proof of what Stonebridge did and what happened to me. I'm trusting you with this because you deserve to know the full truth. What you do with it is your choice, but understand the consequences. If this goes public, people will be hurt. Investigations will be reopened. I might be exposed. Melissa and Sophia will be in danger. You'll be in danger. But you'll also have justice, exposure, accountability for crimes that were swept under the rug. The choice is yours. I won't try to stop you whatever you decide. Nathan. I plugged the drive into my laptop. It was encrypted, but the password was our engagement date. Inside were hundreds of files, documents, photos, videos, audio recordings. I spent the entire day going through them, piece by piece, building a complete picture of what had happened. Nathan had witnessed 3 American contractors execute 2 Afghan civilians in cold blood. He'd recorded it on his phone, shaky footage that was nonetheless clearly identifiable. He'd reported it to Army CID. He'd been attacked in what was staged to look like a Taliban ambush. He'd been recruited into a protection program that required his legal death. The testimony he'd given was detailed and damning. Names, dates, locations, financial records showing payments to Afghan warlords, communications between Stonebridge executives discussing civilian casualties and cover-ups. And it had all been buried under classification, dismissed as inconclusive, settled with minimal penalties. The people responsible had walked away. Some had died in suspicious circumstances. Others had retired wealthy and comfortable. Nathan had given up his entire life to testify, and it had accomplished nothing except his own destruction. I read through transcripts of hearings that had never been made public, saw Nathan's testimony under oath, saw him describe what he witnessed, saw him answer questions from investigators who seemed more interested in protecting the military's reputation than pursuing justice. One investigator had asked if Nathan understood the damage his allegations could do to contractor relationships, to international cooperation, to ongoing operations in Afghanistan. Nathan had replied that he understood, but that didn't change what he'd witnessed. The investigator had suggested maybe Nathan had misunderstood what he'd seen. Maybe the situation was more complex than it appeared. Maybe the Afghans killed had been Taliban fighters and the contractors had been acting in legitimate self-defense. Nathan had stood firm, had insisted on the truth, and been buried for it. The program that had protected him had really been a way to silence him, make him disappear, make his testimony vanish, ensure he could never go public or talk to media or tell anyone what he'd seen. It was efficient and effective and completely destroyed his life. I sat back from my laptop feeling sick. The conspiracy Nathan had described wasn't a conspiracy. It was standard operating procedure, institutional protection of institutional interests. Soldiers were expendable. Truth was negotiable. Justice was optional. And Nathan had been sacrificed to maintain the fiction that everything was under control, that contractors operated ethically, that the war was being fought with honor. I thought about the flash drive in my hand, the power it contained, the evidence that could reopen investigations, could expose corruption, could bring accountability, but also the danger it represented. Nathan had warned me people would be hurt if this went public. Was justice worth that cost? Was exposure worth putting him and his family at risk? I called Lauren and asked her to come over. When she arrived, I showed her everything. The flash drive, the evidence, the testimony, all of it. She read through files in silence, her expression growing darker. When she finished, she looked at me. Emma, this is huge. This is war crimes and cover-ups and institutional corruption. This needs to be public. I'd known she'd say that. Lauren worked for a nonprofit that advocated for veterans' rights. She'd spent years fighting against military bureaucracy and systemic failures. This evidence was everything her organization had been looking for. If I go public, Nathan will be exposed. His new identity will be revealed. He'll be in danger. His wife and stepdaughter will be in danger. The government will probably prosecute him for breaking his silence. I'll be prosecuting him for fraud. It will destroy multiple lives. Lauren's voice was firm. And if you don't go public, the people who committed war crimes get away with it. The system that protects contractors over soldiers continues unchanged. Other Nathans in the future will be silenced the same way. Sometimes doing the right thing means accepting collateral damage. The phrase collateral damage applied to human lives felt obscene, but I understood her logic. Individual suffering weighed against systemic change. Nathan's safety versus accountability for crimes that had been buried. It was an impossible calculus. I spent 3 days trying to decide. I didn't sleep, barely ate, just turned the decision over and over in my mind, trying to find an answer that didn't involve someone getting hurt. But there wasn't one. Every option carried consequences. Every choice caused harm. Finally, I made my decision. I contacted a journalist named Catherine Wu who worked for the Washington Post and specialized in military corruption stories. I told her I had evidence related to contractor war crimes in Afghanistan and cover-ups that went to the highest levels of the Defense Department. She agreed to meet me the next day. I also called Nathan one last time. He answered immediately. Emma, just my name, said with resignation, like he knew what I was going to say. I'm going public, I told him. I'm giving everything to a journalist. The evidence will be published. The story will come out. I'm sorry, but I can't let this stay buried. Nathan was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. You're destroying my life. You understand that? You're destroying Melissa's life, Sophia's life, our unborn baby's life. You're putting all of us in danger because you can't let go of the past. His words hit like physical blows, but I forced myself to continue. You destroyed my life when you faked your death. You destroyed your parents' lives. You destroyed everyone who loved you. You did that for what you believed was right, for protecting people, for serving justice. Now I'm doing what I believe is right. The people who committed war crimes deserve to face consequences. The system that protects them deserves to be exposed. And you gave me the tools to do it. You put the flash drive on my doorstep. You trusted me to make this choice. Nathan laughed bitterly. I gave you the flash drive because I thought you deserved to know the truth. I didn't think you'd use it to destroy what's left of my life. I thought you loved me enough to protect me. The accusation stung because it was partially true. If I loved him the way I had 4 years ago, I would protect him no matter what. But I didn't love that Nathan anymore. That Nathan was dead. Had been dead for 4 years. This Nathan was a stranger who'd built a life on lies while I'd suffered with truth. I did love you, I said. I loved you enough to grieve for 4 years, to destroy myself trying to process your loss, to carry the weight of your death every single day. You don't get to question my love. You forfeited that right when you chose to stay dead. I hung up before he could respond. The meeting with Catherine Wu happened the next morning at a coffee shop in Georgetown. I brought the flash drive, brought printed copies of key documents, brought everything Nathan had given me. Catherine went through it methodically, asking questions, verifying details, taking notes. After 2 hours, she sat back and looked at me seriously. This is legitimate. If I publish this, it's going to cause a massive scandal. Defense Department investigations, congressional hearings, probably criminal prosecutions. People are going to lose their jobs, maybe go to prison. And the source, this Nathan Cross, he's going to be exposed. His witness protection will be compromised. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Nathan, about Melissa, about Sophia, about the baby that would be born into this chaos. I thought about the Afghan civilians who'd been murdered and the other victims of Stonebridge's corruption. I thought about justice and consequences and the price of truth. Yes, I said. Publish it. Catherine nodded. I'll need a few days to verify sources and get official responses from the Defense Department. The story will run early next week. Are you prepared for the attention? Your name will come out as the person who provided the evidence. You'll be in the media, you'll be questioned, possibly harassed. I hadn't fully considered that aspect. I'd been so focused on Nathan's exposure that I hadn't thought about my own. But it was too late to back out now. I'll deal with it, I said. The story broke on a Monday morning. The Washington Post ran it as their lead. Banner headline, War Crimes Cover-Up, How the Defense Department Silenced a Soldier Who Witnessed Contractor Murders. The article detailed everything. Stonebridge's systematic killings of Afghan civilians, the staged attack on Nathan's convoy, his testimony and the subsequent burial of the investigation, the witness protection program that had essentially imprisoned him in a new identity. Nathan's real name was used, though his current identity as David Whitmore wasn't revealed initially. The article mentioned he was living under protection, and that revealing his location would endanger his life. But of course, people started digging immediately. By that afternoon, social media had identified David Whitmore. His address was posted online, his wife's name, his stepdaughter's school. Angry people showed up at his house, some supporting him as a whistleblower, others condemning him as a traitor. Melissa's social media filled with hate messages and threats. The school had to go into lockdown when someone called in a bomb threat. I watched it all unfold on the news from my apartment, feeling sick. I'd known there would be consequences, but I hadn't imagined it would be this immediate and this violent. My phone rang constantly. Journalists wanting interviews. Nathan's parents calling to scream at me for exposing their son. Lauren trying to make sure I was okay. I ignored most of them. The one call I answered was from Agent Crawford at CID. His voice was cold with fury. Ms. Kaplan, you've committed multiple federal crimes by releasing classified information. You'll be receiving a subpoena to appear before a grand jury. You should get a lawyer immediately. You're facing serious prison time. I hung up without responding. I'd known legal consequences were possible, was prepared to face them if necessary. What I wasn't prepared for was the guilt. The crushing weight of knowing I'd destroyed Nathan's carefully constructed life, had endangered his family, had turned his wife and daughter into targets. I told myself it was worth it, that justice mattered more than individual comfort. But watching news footage of Melissa crying on her porch, 8 months pregnant, being harassed by reporters and protesters, made it hard to believe. 3 days after the story broke, Nathan called me. His voice was flat, emotionless. Melissa left me, took Sophia and went to her sister's house. She says she can't trust me, can't raise a child with someone who lied about everything. She's filing for divorce. My stepdaughter won't talk to me. The baby will be born to a father she'll never know because Melissa is changing her last name and mine legally to cut all ties. You got what you wanted. You destroyed my life as thoroughly as I destroyed yours. The words should have made me feel vindicated, but they just made me feel empty. I didn't want this, I said. I wanted justice. I wanted the people who committed war crimes to face consequences. You were collateral damage? Nathan laughed, and the sound was broken, shattered. Collateral damage. That's what everyone said about the Afghan Stonebridge killed. That's what CID said about burying the investigation. That's what you're saying about my family. Everyone has their justification for destroying lives. At least own what you did, Emma. Don't hide behind justice and morality. You did this because you were angry, because I hurt you and you wanted to hurt me back. Just admit it. Maybe he was right. Maybe justice had been an excuse. A noble-sounding cover for revenge. Maybe I'd destroyed his life not for systematic change, but for personal satisfaction. The realization made me nauseous. "I'm sorry," I said. The words were inadequate but genuine. "I'm sorry your family got hurt. I'm sorry Melissa and Sophia became targets. That wasn't what I wanted." Nathan's voice was hollow. "It doesn't matter what you wanted. It matters what happened. And what happened is, you took the last good thing in my life and burned it down. I hope it was worth it." He hung up. Over the next 2 weeks, the scandal exploded. Congressional hearings were scheduled. The Defense Department launched a new investigation into Stonebridge, now operating under the name Fortress Solutions. 3 former executives were indicted on fraud charges. Evidence of additional war crimes emerged as more soldiers came forward, emboldened by Nathan's testimony becoming public. Lauren's organization used the case to push for reform of contractor oversight. New legislation was proposed. Nathan became a symbol, held up as an example of whistleblowers being failed by the system. Think pieces were written about institutional betrayal and the cost of truth. But Nathan himself disappeared. After the divorce was finalized, after media attention died down, he vanished. His David Whitmore identity was burned, his Nathan Cross identity too famous to use. He became someone else, somewhere else, living under yet another false name. His parents released a statement asking for privacy and saying their son just wanted to be left alone. I received my subpoena and hired a lawyer. The grand jury hearing was scheduled for 3 months away. I faced potential charges of releasing classified information, though my lawyer believed we could argue public interest defense. The case would likely drag on for years. In the meantime, I tried to rebuild my life around the hole I'd created. I quit my job because the media attention made it impossible to work normally. I moved out of my apartment because people kept showing up looking for me. I started over in a new city under a different name, not a legal identity change like Nathan's, but just going by my middle name and staying off social media. Ironically, I'd made myself into a ghost too. The journalist Catherine Wu won awards for her reporting. The story was cited in congressional hearings as evidence of systematic failures. Real change seemed possible. Seemed like it might actually happen this time. But it had cost so much. Nathan's destroyed life, Melissa's shattered trust, Sophia's stolen stability, my own legal jeopardy and self-imposed exile. Was justice worth that price? I didn't know. Some nights I believed it was. Other nights I just felt like someone who'd destroyed lives out of pain and anger and called it righteousness. A year after the story broke, I got a letter. Inside was a single page in Nathan's handwriting. "Emma, I've had a year to process everything that happened. I'm writing this not for you, but for me. For closure, I guess, though I'm not sure that exists anymore. You were right to expose what I witnessed. The corruption needed to be revealed. You did what I couldn't do, what I didn't have the courage to do. You chose truth over comfort. I spent 4 years hiding because I thought protecting myself and my loved ones was more important than accountability. You proved me wrong. The cost was high. But maybe some things are worth the cost. Maybe justice matters more than individual happiness. I don't know if I believe that yet, but I'm trying to. I'm trying to rebuild again, become someone new again. This time without lies, without deception. Just a quiet life somewhere far from everything that happened. I don't forgive you, not yet. Maybe not ever. But I understand why you did it. Take care of yourself, Nathan." I read the letter 5 times. He understood but didn't forgive. He recognized the necessity, but resented the cost. It was messy and human and probably the best resolution I could hope for. I wrote back to the Denver address, knowing he probably wouldn't be there, knowing the letter would likely never reach him. I mailed the letter and never got a response. Didn't expect one. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.